Hey, everybody. Welcome to this episode of The Archive, where we strive to tell interesting LARP stories and preserve LARP history. I am St. Godric, and this evening I am joined by Syr Falquinn Tenon, a knight, flame knight, correct?
Yes.
Perfect. And so glad to have you on. How are you doing this evening?
I'm good. I'm tired, but otherwise I'm good.
That's good. And your wiki says Golden Vale. Is that correct?
Yes.
Of Golden Vale. So I have not ever traveled to Golden Vale. Give me a rough geographic area of where it is, what states you guys encompass.
Okay. Golden Vale used to be massive. It's Golden Vale is New York and basically New England, New York, Vermont, New Hampshire, Connecticut, Massachusetts, that kind of stuff.
So north of Crystal Groves.
Yes, directly north of Crystal Groves. Cool. CG actually used to be part of Golden Vale years ago.
Cool. I'm getting my Amtgard geography down as I'm interviewing people from different kingdoms. It's like, I know you're somewhat over there, but I'm getting it. I'll nail it here before too long.
It's all good. It's all good.
So Syr, I want to ask, start off softball question that we give everybody. Before you got into LARPing, what were your nerdy hobbies? What were your LARP adjacent things that kind of directed you into LARPing? What is your nerdy? What was your flavor of nerd before you jumped into the foam stick world?
There is a gaming system called Palladium. They have a bunch. It's a tabletop game, like Rifts, Palladium, and stuff like that. And so that's where I got started back when I was in middle school, with a bunch of friends down in South Carolina. We all just kind of like, oh, hey, we all really like this stuff, and we got into it really heavy. I didn't actually discover LARP until I moved to Texas when I was 15, and I met people that are still friends with today that are still fairly active in Amtgard today, actually, too, which is kind of nice. And they're the ones that actually drew me in. We met in the lunchroom, and they were playing Magic the Gathering, and I had heard of Magic, but I didn't know what the hell it was. And so I started watching them, and I was like, hey, can I come over and get to know what's going, like just sort of the, hey, you're the nerds, I'm a nerd, I don't know anybody here. And it just kind of worked out that way. About a year, I went to school there at the high school in Boerne, Texas for about a year. And then I started playing Amtgard when I was 16, just after I turned 16.
Cool. I always joke that everyone on my podcast has either started in like one of three ways: Dungeons and Dragons, Magic the Gathering, or Warhammer. I have yet to meet someone who has not done one of those three things before they got into Amtgard.
Yeah, for me, it was Rifts first, then D&D and Magic the Gathering.
Cool. I love it. So tell me about your first couple of times out at Amtgard. What was that like?
The first time, let's see, I started playing late May of 96. My first time out, I actually couldn't play. I went out with some friends. There's a couple people out in the San Antonio area. James Shalau went by the name of Marauder. Chris McDaniels, who I think still plays occasionally, goes by the name of Scarecrow. And Nathan Willis, who I think plays every now and again, goes by the name of Soul, S-O-L, with a hyphen over the O. And my mother wasn't there. I was 16. I didn't have a waiver signed. So I basically sat my ass down at a bench and talked with like the 2 or 3 non-coms that were there while my friends went out into the woods and played for 4 or 5 hours. And finally we went home and I was like, oh, it looks cool. I'd like to be able to play next time I go. And then my mom drove me out the next weekend. She signed the waiver. She realized that, okay, these people are a little weird, but they don't seem dangerous. She made sure that I had a ride home because my friends were out. And she signed the waiver, so she went home. God, I'm trying to think, and I'm not trying to name drop. I really am not, but it just happened to be where I was. A lot of people were around. I think my second or third week out, Sir Draknar had come down from Austin, because it's just in San Antonio, had come down from Austin, and I had one sword that I had just bought off another guy named Sir McGregor, and I didn't know what the hell I was doing. I had borrowed Odin's hammer, from Bromir, and I had no idea how to fight Florentine at all. and Draknar, spent probably 45 minutes actually teaching me the very basics of stance and how to hold your hand and use both hands and that kind of stuff like that. So it was a lot of fun. My experiences were great, at least in the very beginning. Nobody was a dick. Everybody had a good time. I think I played warrior till I got to like second level, but this was back in the day when it was 12 credits to level up to second level, and then I played wizard once or twice.
I didn't know you were allowed to play warrior in Texas. I've always been told it was too hot.
I didn't have armor.
Okay.
I didn't have armor at the time, but no, played warrior, dabbled with I think wizard once or twice, assassin once, and then hit barbarian and stuck with that for 5 years.
That's awesome.
Sorry.
No, you're good. What kingdom was that in at the time?
Celestial Kingdom, CK.
CK? Cool. Mm-hmm. So you said 96, correct?
Yes.
So let me guess, is that V5? Or is that
when I started, it was V6, but it was very early V6. I want to say V6 had been out from what I was told, 6 months to maybe a year when I started playing.
Cool. That's neat. So you said the fighting aspect, warrior into barbar, was that what was the biggest draw for you? Was the combat side? I'm assuming it was because you're a teenage kid. For me, at least, that's what I was like. Yeah, I got to hit people.
It wasn't the flirbiness of it. Like for me, it was. I was young. I had a whole hell of a lot of anger built up in me from other shit, and it was a way for me to release that aggression. That I didn't hurt anybody. Nobody hurt me. I got to hit people and go home, And but it was the combat. It was my primary draw.
I wish my mom would not have signed a waiver when I was 16 to play this game. I joined. Man, I was probably 20, so I wasn't that much older. But I joined in 2011. And was my mom didn't have to sign, which is good because I do not think she would have. So
I thought they wanted me to get into sports, so this was as close as I was going to get. So she was happy with that.
Good on her. Good on her. So after local park, enjoyed the fighting. How long were you involved with Amtgard before you started hitting events or started getting involved at a larger kingdom or inner kingdom scale?
Let's see. My first event, I want to say, was Spring War of 97.
Okay.
Hey, Dominic.
That was in Burnett when they used to use the old Burnett, Texas. They used to use the old it was a rodeo place that they would rent out for Spring War. And then a few months after that, I went to my first clan in the old Cloudcroft site. I missed, and for like the next couple of years, I hit pretty much every Spring War. I hit Clan in 97, I hit Clan in 99, and aside from that, I didn't really do a ton of traveling. Mostly stuck to the San Antonio area, played at Gates of Solaris, which was my original park, and then that merged with Trader's Hollow and became what's now called Trader's Gate in San Antonio. As far as like interkingdom stuff, that didn't really happen. Let's see, I moved out of Texas in 2001. Was in New York City for a few years. Didn't really play any Amtgard. I had heard of Golden Vale, but I didn't have any contacts with Golden Vale. And the old Golden Vale Yahoo page, Yahoo groups was active, and a friend of mine directed me towards that. And they're like, "Hey, Golden Vale's up here. Go hit them up," because I was within their territory. And I'd spoken to the hell is Jen's game name?
Jen?
Yes.
Fiona.
Dame Fiona. Dame Fiona had I got a hold of her because she was in Golden Vale proper at the time. And she said that there was an event called Feast of Fools that was coming up, which was going to be in April. And she got me in touch with, because I was a war dancer at the time.
Cool.
And she goes, "Oh, I know some war dancers down there." And she got me in touch with Syr Vasa and Lady Syrah. They let me crash at their place. I went to Feast of Fools. Then I went to my first Great Eastern back. This is 2003 was my first Great Eastern. And then I ended up moving from New York City. I was living in the Bronx, but I ended up moving from New York City to Maryland in June or July of 2003. And I stayed there until as part of Crystal Groves proper, until my wife and I moved back up to Binghamton, New York. Well, not back up to, but Binghamton, New York in 2010. And then I transferred my credits over to Golden Vale.
I gotcha. One of the things, first off, I didn't realize Feast of Fools was that old. That is on one of the feasts out east are some of the events that I want to hit that they're on my short list.
I want to say the first feast of, I believe the first event that CG ran was called the Feast of the Dead. And that was obviously before I started going out there, but that was 2000, maybe 99, 2000, I think was their first Feast of the Dead. And then they did Feast of Fools, Feast of Dead every year after that.
That's
sometime
awesome.
around there.
I have always been jealous of, especially Texas, but some of the kingdoms that have multiple kingdoms within driving distance. I have always grown up in the Rising Winds. And so I would drive for 8 hours and then be in the middle of the kingdom and have another 8 hours to go to the other end of the kingdom. And so when you're in Texas and I hear of all these things, it's like, yeah, we were day tripping or weekend tripping. We could hit an event every weekend if we wanted to between all the kingdoms. And I'm like, man, what is that like?
I kick myself now because when I was younger, I could have. Being in San Antonio, it's CK's Central. It was 3.5 hours up to Emerald Hills. It was northeast towards Dallas and EH. It was 5 or 6 hours northwest for Golden Plains. It was 3 hours southeast to hit up wetlands, or direct east actually to hit up wetlands. And I never really did. I kick myself for it now. Had I thought about it then, I probably would have, but not much I could do about it. But
so our part currently is we're a freehold and we're about to petition to join the Kingdom of Winter's Edge. And if we would have joined the Rising Winds, we would have been the southernmost park in the kingdom. And now by joining Winter's Edge, we are the northernmost park in their kingdom. So like either way, we've got just this massive expanse.
Massive distance, yeah. And
so whenever I hear of Amtgarders who are like, yeah, I've been to 6 different kingdoms this year. I'm like, how?
Oh, God. Well, for me, I think part of the reason why I didn't do as much traveling is because we had Spring War every year, and at Spring War everybody came. You had Golden Plains, Emerald. You had all the Texas kingdoms, Dragonspine, Burning Lands. They all came there. So for me, at least, there wasn't a lot of desire to travel. I should have, but I didn't.
So you said 3 kingdoms then that you have played in?
Yeah, 3 kingdoms that I've been part of, yes.
Cool. So have you noticed any differences between them? Like what?
Oh my God.
Okay, I was going to say, so what are some of those differences? And first off, what are they? And then 2, why do you think they exist? Because I think that's a fascinating concept of how the kingdoms differ.
So I haven't been back to Texas, Amtgard in, God, almost 20 years. But just my friends that are still active, from what I understand, it's more or less the same. It hasn't really changed a whole lot. The culture's more family friendly than it used to be. But what's that?
We visited the College Station Park one time.
Oh, that's true. We did go to Slaughter Creek. But in Texas, especially, combat was king. Yes, there was role play. Yes, there was, battle games and quests, but it was all about swing and stick. That's what just about everybody that I was involved in wanted to do. We all had dreams of becoming sword knights and all this other kind of crap like that. And
the dreams of newbies.
Yes, the dreams of newbies. And again, I can't speak for all of the CK. I can speak for my area. My area we would usually play 2 or 3 battle games a day, and then it was ditching until the sun went down. Yeah, so in between battle game, people would get there, show up, ditch a little bit to limber up, have our first battle game. You ditch a little bit more, have our second battle game, and then people would just ditch until everybody went home. When I moved to CG, it was a very, very different atmosphere. The ditch, to the best of my knowledge, is still not huge there. At least in CG proper. I can't speak for everywhere, but they were much more battle game and quest. where they tried to do big, expansive games. They had much more area to work in, and they were more about the immersion and character and role play. Golden Veil has a very similar feeling. Golden Veil is a little bit more stick, at least in my experience between the two. I can't speak for current, but Golden Veil seems to be a little bit more stick heavy. And then obviously there was Potato for a long time, and he really kind of raised up everything.
In my side note, Tato, I think one of the most.
Oh, that's right. He goes by Tato now. Excuse me. Sorry.
Well, no, you're good. One of the most influential fighters, at least in my time. I don't know about those who came before me, but with his YouTube presence and his teaching mentality, him and Delos, I think, are probably the two biggest. And maybe Anatole, but all three of them have massive online presences, and I really respect that. Those who can teach.
Yeah, I think with Tato, he started. I don't know if he started Warlord Weekly, but I know he was super involved in it when it became big.
Well, and he had a whole CG dojo thing, and they were.
Oh, that's right, he did too. I forgot about that.
Yeah, the weekly shot openers or whatever he called them, and had a bunch of Pell videos.
I completely forgot about that. Yeah. I used to watch them a lot, actually, to try to get my stick up, but I'm old. I'm busted. Knees are shot.
I get that for sure. I don't feel like I'm old, but like I go out there now and I fight if I don't stretch beforehand, I'm dead the next day. If I fight for 20 or 30 minutes, I'm like, oh man, why are my elbows popping? It's like, oh, I don't like this. What happened?
Like, I'm the 40-year-old or 41-year-old out there on the field about 15 minutes before the first game, and I'm stretching, doing all kinds of stuff, and doing some light calisthenics just to kind of get everything greased. And the kids are looking at me. I'm like, you're gonna be here in 10 years, I promise you.
I remember making fun of those guys. I was like, what the heck are you stretching for, you oldie? And then now I'm out here like doing the same things before the games.
Yeah. It works that way. But so I think CG, at least when I was there, was very, very role play heavy, to kind of get back to your question. Golden Veil had more stick at the time, but obviously before Tato. Golden Veil to right now though, especially, and it was a huge part then too, was very A&S heavy. Very, very arts and sciences heavy. At the time, predominantly Garbers.
Okay.
It was Dame Fiona, I think, got hers for Garb. Her mother, I can't remember her name, but she's also a Serpent Knight who got hers for Garber. Most of the Serpent Knights in Golden Veil are specifically for Garbers, or at least used to be. And GV is still very A&S heavy. It's kind of gotten away from Garb. It's branched out more armorers. I'm slowly getting into blacksmithing. Cool. I've got a couple other friends who are also doing the same. So it's just kind of the way it is. That's for CG was roleplay, Texas was fighting, and GV, to me at least, is very A&S heavy.
I am, for the first time in my Amtgard career, beginning to travel now and seeing other kingdoms doing things differently, and the culture being different from my home kingdom is fascinating to me. I just expected that every kingdom had a huge battle game presence, and every kingdom had a huge fighting company presence. And I just assumed, all of these things that I kind of have loved and taken for granted. And then now that I'm looking at other kingdoms, I'm like, oh man, is that really? Oh, okay. You do it this way. Like, just for instance, here, Rising Winds and the Winter's Edge, which is where we're petitioning. Winter's Edge, the regent is considered the autocrat of events, and the champion, the kingdom champion, is the warocrat, and they can opt to give those out if they don't want to do it. But that was nothing like that was in the Rising Winds. And so when I was regent of the Rising Winds, my only two jobs were to run a tournament. Run two tournaments. And I'm like, oh, So you actually give the regent something to do. That's pretty neat. Like that's a novel thing. You know what I mean? Like,
CG, I don't know if CG still does it that way, but that's how it used to be in Crystal Groves. The regent whoever was regent was in charge of running Feast of Fools or Feast of the Dead. Champion was Warcrat for the events, and they could potentially give it to somebody else.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's still how they do it, but I know that's how they used to. And that was very different from because I come from Texas, there were bid teams. If there was an event run, people did bids for it, and they threw it out there, and then there was the big vote and everything else like that. I think CG bids it out now.
Okay.
But for a long time, it used to be it was the regent and champion. I would think I was Warcrat for one of the Feast of Dead back when I was champion, when they were a duchy. No, I was Warcrat. CG, I don't think had become a kingdom yet at that point. They were still duchy.
Interesting. So I know Master Rose. You said champion, so I'm assuming crowns are up there. You said you're doing some blacksmithing, so I'm assuming your owls are getting up there. What are your favorite parts of the game when you're talking about the ladder awards and things like that? What are your interests? You can say everything that counts.
But yeah, right now, fighting has always been number one for me. I still love to get out and swing stick. It's just something it's the thing that drew me into the game. It is, I will, as my wife puts it, I will do that until they drag me off the battlefield, walker and all.
And then you'll start arching.
Yeah, probably. I'll figure something out, but for a long time, my primary focus was service. Obviously, it's how I got the Flame Knight. I've held, pretty much at Kingdom level, I've been KGMR and Kingdom Champion. I was Kingdom Champion once and KGMR twice. At Shire level, I've held every office at least once, multiple times, and in a lot of cases, champion. I think I was champion for like 3 years straight. That gets old after a while. Yeah, somebody had to do it. But right now, my biggest interest aside from fighting is I'm actually really digging the blacksmithing. I like the idea behind it. There's a lot more science that goes into it, like you got to make sure that you're depending on what your anvils are made out of, it's going to determine your rebound. The metals you're working going to determine how hard it is to move them. Like if you're doing, I believe it's brass, as you hit brass, where a lot of other metals, you get them hot, they get softer. Brass is a little bit different. You actually have to work it a little bit different, but either way. My owls, I think I'm at 5 owls. It's 5 or 6 owls. I have 6 or maybe 7 dragons. I have 8 crown. And then obviously got the Master Rose.
And then you said the fighting has always been one of your favorites. Where, if you don't mind me asking, where are you at on Warriors and the new Battle Master, if your kingdom has done those?
Oh, I forgot about that. Warriors, I think I have 3.
Officially, you have 3.
Officially, I have 3. I have 9 Orders of the Battle.
Cool.
Yeah, Pix gave me 9. I can't ever remember her game name. It always escapes me. I've got 2, technically 3. I have my Paragon Peasant, which some people...
Awesome. I love it. I love that nonsense.
That actually started as a joke. Somebody, this probably 5-6 years ago now, somebody was talking about how it was so easy to get Paragons. And I'm like, do you have one? And they were like, no. And I'm like, all right, I'm going to show you something. And I started pushing for Paragon Peasant, and it was purely as a joke. And then I actually really got into it. Like, I'd go out there and I'd rub mud all over myself. I would wear tattered garb, fight with just the one single sword. It was a lot of fun. But I've got Master Barbarian under V6 and Master Healer under V7. Cool. So that's why they gave me up to 9. I don't have anything more permanent, but I'm working on actually trying to get Paragon Paladin if I can.
Cool. There is a knight in the Rising Wind, Syr Falquinn, and he is trying to get... Okay, I know Carrie. Yeah. So he's trying to get Paragon Peasant as well, and he's got the full kit, and he'll sit outside of our feast halls with a sign, like please donate food, or like, veteran of whatever battle game was just playing, like, and he hams it up. I love that stuff.
There was another guy that used to be pretty active out here. 1 second. No, you're fine. There was another guy out here who, like, they literally built the theme reign around my trying to be, well, not around me trying to become a Paragon Peasant, but it was sort of the springboard for it. And there became this big theme reign where it was the peasant is the kingdom and everything else like that. We had like this big battle at Eastern and everything. It was a lot of fun. I don't want to take credit for it because it was not my idea. It was just sort of the springboard. Like he reached out to me because his persona was a peasant and I had been pushing to try to get it. And he was like, hey, would you be cool in helping us do this? And I was like, yeah, that sounds like a lot of fun to do this. So it was great.
That's awesome. I have been for the last few months trying to think about how I could get a Paragon Color, if that's a thing. And I know in some kingdoms do, some kingdoms don't. I've got some medical stuff going on that's going to keep me off the field for the foreseeable future, and that utterly kills me. But then I saw I was just one day perusing the AMP wiki, and someone had a Paragon Color, and I'm like, okay. And then I know some kingdoms do the master or the Paragon Reeve, Walker in the middle as well. And I think that's another cool option. I love all of the non-standard, not normal class Paragons. I think those are neat.
Our current monarch, like I said, I can't remember her name. It drives me nuts, but she goes by Pix outside of the game. Excuse me, I'm sorry, let me correct myself there, Riel, I'm terrible at that name. They are technically Paragon Color. They took the title of primary color, so that was kind of neat how you said you were something you were interested in. So there actually is somebody currently out there that's got it. I believe they took I think the official was primary color, something along those lines, which is really neat. And they've got this awesome sash that somebody made, like it's strips of so there's the silver out, and then there's like basically bars of the different colors for the different classes all the way through it, and it's really cool.
That is cool. We have one lady in my fighting company has I think hers was master color. I think it was a V7 one, and her name is Bobo, and she is fantastic. She cooks for all of our fighting company, every event. She's the one that our food, our water, she takes care of us. And she's the only one I've met in person. And I'm like, that's kind of neat. I like that. I like that. So your Master Rose. Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead. You're good.
I was just going to ask your Master Rose. What was that path like for you? What were your like early stages of roses compared to your later stages of roses?
My first few roses actually were my first two roses were for helping out at Spring War. I want to say it was 97 and 98, or maybe 98, 99. My first rose was for helping tear down Spring Feast at the event. Like everybody ate and everybody went out and did their own thing, and I helped stay behind and tore down the feast hall and got all the stuff put away and all the trash thrown away. And then I think it was the next year I got my second rose for helping set up feast and helping serve feast and stuff like that. Toward later end, my ninth rose was for being co-feast crat for Feast of Fools. Yeah, Feast of Fools was how I got my ninth one. My wife and I were feast for that. Cool. She got her 8th and I got my 9th. And my 10th was given to me by Syr Falquinn. Apparently, after when we moved up here, my wife and I started up a park that's still active now called Two Rivers Point. And it was my wife, myself, my sister-in-law, and her husband. And we were the first 4 people of Two Rivers Point. Thankfully, all of us were veterans, so it wasn't as terrible with all new people. But starting the park and keeping it going and holding office, and I guess a bunch of people spoke to Bowen and told Bowen that they felt I deserved my 10th, and so Bowen gave me my 10th. And then, that was 2010. I got my masterhood. Let me see, it was 5 years between my 10th and my masterhood. that was a grind. That was a hell of a grind. Because in a lot of cases, you know, at least it used to be, people would get their 10th, and then usually within 6 months to a year, the master came. You know, people would keep doing the same thing. During that time, in those years, I had been in Kingdom Office twice. Kingdom Champion, Kingdom GMR. I actually got it at the end of my first reign as Kingdom GMR, if I remember correctly. I had created an event called Spice Wars, which ran for 3 years. It was a small local event. Been in office God knows how many times, subcredit different things, and it was a slog. But I honestly, there were a couple of times that I thought about quitting. I was not the game, but just like, I'm done.
Yeah.
I don't know what else I can do. You know, the scuttlebutt was, well, you're going to have to run a big event. If you want that masterhood, you're going to have to run that big event. And I'm like, that's not healthy for me. It's not good for my mind. It was like, I guess this is where I am. And I just kept doing what I was doing. I got my masterhood.
Get that for sure.
Got my masterhood. Do that. Oh yeah. So you got my masterhood. It was knighted in 2019. My masterhood was 2 years before that. So yeah, it was a while. It was a slog, but I can't complain too much.
Yeah, that's one of the things that fascinates me too. You're talking about differences in kingdoms. The Rising Winds has always treated masterhood as a 10th. And then when I started doing these interviews, I realized that that's not the same everywhere, that a lot of kingdoms treat masterhood as like an 11th award, essentially. Do you have any opinion on either one of those?
So as far as like masterhood goes, I think if somebody's gotten their 10th, in general, I'm cool with somebody getting sort of at the same time. The person's done their work in whatever their field happens to be. You know, here's your 10th, and because you've gotten your 10th, you're now a master in whatever your field is. I can see how a lot of people find that masterhood daunting, because for me it wasn't just one project after getting my 10th. It was years of grinding and and I know the whole idea is, you know, at least it used to be, it's more acceptable now. Like, you're not supposed to do the work for the awards, and I wasn't. But it also kind of felt like, why am I doing this? Why do I keep doing this? But it was worth it. It was absolutely worth it. But yeah, like I'm not super familiar with how CG Knight, I believe the COK is very heavily involved with how they do it there. The COK here in Golden Vale is an advisory board. As far as like knighting, I'm sorry, I'm rambling.
Yeah. No, you're good.
But yeah, for me, the idea of masterhood being basically an 11th award. I don't think that the person should have to do more projects to prove that they're a master. If they've climbed the ladder, give it.
Yeah, I think I'm of the same mind. It seems strange to me to have 10 and then an 11th. Like, I don't know. I like my round numbers. Let's just keep it at 10 and call it done. So for your,
sorry, go ahead.
No, you're good. I think we've got a little bit of a lag going on. So, what you were talking about?
It's kind of starting a little bit on my end too.
You're talking about the grind in between your 10 and masterhood. For you and your climb, do you think that was the most difficult part of it all? And if it was, or if it wasn't,
hands down.
What was, and what made it so difficult?
For me, that 5-year gap is, to me, the most difficult, because it kind of felt like I was doing all the work, but nobody was, or not all the work, obviously it wasn't just me, but I was doing a lot of work and continually doing work, continually putting myself out there. And it just kind of felt like nobody was recognizing it. And I will freely admit, I got jaded. I got pretty jaded. And that to me was just the hardest thing, is it kind of felt like, why am I continuing to do this? You know, am I doing this because I want the award, or am I doing this because I actually enjoy what I'm doing? And I'll admit it was a little bit of both. I really did enjoy the work. I liked the people, you know, being happy with what we were doing, but I also wanted the recognition. But it was the hardest part. Is it was just kind of felt like beating my head against a brick wall. Like, what am I doing wrong, or what am I not doing?
Mm-hmm. I get that for sure. The burnout and the frustration of chasing the awards is real. Like a lot of people don't like, they talk about burnout, and then once it hits, it's like, I don't know what to do with this anymore. What advice would you have for somebody who is in there or about to be on the verge of burnout? What advice would you have for someone who is just like, I don't know if I want to do this anymore?
Take a break. Hands down, take a break. If there's one piece of advice I can tell anyone in this game, regardless of what their different path, for lack of a better phrase, is, if you feel like you're burning out, if you feel like you've, I promise you are more burned out than you realize you actually are. Because a lot of times just that psychological thing, like, you don't want to admit that you're burned out. And when you get to the point that you actually admit that you have nothing left in the gas tank, like that tank was empty 2 years ago. Step away, take a break. You got to find something in this organization, in this game, that still brings you some satisfaction. If you don't get that satisfaction, you're going to wind up hating it and leaving. It's just, you're going to wind up becoming very jaded. You're going to wind up getting pissed off, and you're going to, in my experience, the people who can't find that satisfaction with whatever they need, whatever it is, they say, fuck Amtgard and you guys suck and I'm so sick and tired of this, and they feel jaded and so on. But take a break. If, like, for me, my breaks were always, I just stopped holding office. I stopped running for office. I stopped doing service projects. All I did, and I broke away from politics. All I would do is I would just play the game. Come to Amtgard, put on my garb, play in the battle games, ditch, and go home. I had nothing to do with anything else because I didn't want to. And I had to, at one point, I was part of, I think, 50 or 60 different Facebook pages that I was very heavily and actively talking on. And then I cut myself down to, I think it was like 11, and I would just occasionally hop on there. And I felt so much tension come off of my shoulders when I wasn't constantly fighting every fight that there was to fight in the game of Amtgard, that it really helped me recharge a lot faster. But I've also, there have been times where I have completely separated from the organization as a whole. I had nothing to do with Amtgard for 6 months or even a year because I had to. If I had stayed to even be remotely involved, I was going to wind up hating it, and that's not something I want to do.
Yeah, 100%. It's funny. What you just described is what I had just finished doing. Probably a year and a half ago, I felt for the first time in my Amtgard career that maybe I'm on the edge of that burnout. And I was jaded, extremely jaded. And I went through and I deleted every Facebook group that was Amtgard related other than like 3. And I started to focus on the things of the game that I loved. And I realized I was spending so much of my time on the things that I hated. Like the things that you enjoy are what keep you coming back. Right. And like, if it's something that you're not having fun with anymore, quit doing all that stuff and go do what you have fun.
Yeah. If you don't, you're going to wind up hating it. Truth of it. You're going to wind up hating it. And why put the negative energy out there if you're not getting any fun? There was a guy down in CG. He hasn't played in a few years, but he always had this piece of advice that he said to people is that if it stops being fun, it's time to walk away. And if you're basically, I took that as, if you're not getting satisfaction, if you're not getting something beneficial out of this, you need to step back.
Or just find another avenue. Maybe not necessarily step back from the game entirely, but just find another, like this game is wide. Like there is a whole lot of fun things to do in this game. go focus on something else for 6 months to a year. Switch a ladder award up. If you're sitting at like 7 or 8 and you're frustrated, put that down for a year and go grab another ladder award, or go grab another craft, or go enjoy the game in another setting, and just find what is fun again.
Well, that's kind of what I mean is I don't necessarily mean you have to keep doing this. Like, well, for me, it's the separation, but for other, if you can make that, like you were saying, go from one path to another path or find a different avenue, go for it. If you can still find satisfaction, if you're still getting the good brain chemicals out of it, more power to you. Everybody kind of functions a little different. For me, a lot of times I just need that separation, just so I can kind of break away and not be so hyper focused on what is causing me strife at the time.
For sure. I joke too. One of the big things for me was I had a vacation LARP. That was Dagger Here for me. And I could go to Dagger Here or Bellogarth games and not know any of their drama, not be in charge of anything, and just actually play the game. And that helped me a ton. Yeah. Just having a vacation game.
For me, I hit when I was in CG, I'd hit a wall, like just hardcore hit a wall, and probably came as close to quitting Amtgard as I've ever come. And I had some friends that were older Scadians who cross gamed, and I never really got heavy into the SCA. I think I only ever fought heavy like 2 or 3 times, and it was in their backyard. But I really got into just kind of the history and learning sort of how to make armor and like more accurate armor, and it was a way to still feed that I had, but it wasn't directly attached to it. Attached to Amtgard specifically. I've not done a ton of cross gaming, so I can't. For me, it's almost been exclusively Amtgard, a little bit of SCA, but I know people that love to cross game, and more power to you. You have fun with that.
Yeah,
get one of that.
Go ahead.
No, I get you. I get you for sure. I think you hit on a good point. Find something that you enjoy about the game that you can do when you're away from the game as well. Part of the reason I love the SCA so much is the research that can happen outside of my actual park day. And it gives me something throughout the week to focus on that is enjoyable, that isn't drama. Like it gives me something to do with my hands. It gives me something to do with my mind that's not just ruminating on Facebook nonsense throughout the whole week. And that was a big help for me.
Yeah, I couldn't even tell you how many hours I would spend a night arguing with people 1,000 miles away because somebody felt a certain kind of way about this particular rule, or I felt a certain about this particular rule or to change, or you find, at least for me, I came to realize a lot of it just really didn't matter. It was a lot of hot air being blown out into the void, and it didn't change a damn. But one of the things I did learn in that regard was, as far as like trying to incorporate change, and I know I'm kind of going off on a tangent, excuse me.
You're good, man. We love tangents.
Another piece of advice, like you were saying earlier.
I said we love tangents. Keep going. Keep going.
Now, kind of back on the piece of advice that I can give to people is, yes, like as far as, fight the good fight, whatever that happens to be for you. But you'll be able to affect more change locally in a lot of cases than you will just burning the candle at both ends, trying to fight every fight everywhere. Focus your energy closer. If you're trying to affect the change in your kingdom, start at your park. Try to affect that change at your park. And then if it succeeds, you can start trying to influence other people, convince other people like, hey, this is a good way to do something, and it can grow from there. Versus I know a lot of people, and I used to be the same way, would just kind of browbeat and try to force people to, I'm right and you need to accept this. And a lot of times when you have that mentality, myself included, you're actually not as right as you think you are. You're not as correct as you think you are.
Yeah, I get that for sure. One of the other things that helped me a whole lot was taking a step back and helping new players enjoy the game and learn the game, and just seeing their excitement recharge my battery. Like new players making their first sword or making their first tunic, and being able to help them navigate that first 18 months of their Amtgard career, man, that rejuvenates me more than almost anything.
Oh, it's super invigorating. It really is, because
Like sideways.
as cliche as it sounds, you can kind of see it through fresh eyes. Like you see all of that excitement of the stuff that you've taken for granted, that, you know, making your first stick. Oh, this is actually legal, you know, or your first piece of garb, or your first piece of chainmail, or your first poetry entry, or whatever. Yeah, anything that you do for that first time, and you kind of see that excitement. It's like, oh, that's right. That's why I liked that. Okay, and then it kind of makes you want to do it. And get back to the basics and get back to the root of what you liked about that. And sometimes you can, you know, find that you still really do enjoy that thing and you want to keep going at it.
Well, and it also is a reminder that I look at, like, I am not a fantastic weaponsmith in this game, but when I sit down with new players, we can make them sticks that they can use. You know what I mean? It's kind of that reminder of, I know more than what I think I know, you know, and that's helpful, again, with the mindset of I can do more good for this game than I realize sometimes. And that has always helped me kind of keep on track.
Yeah, I'm not a specialist. I think of myself, I used to call myself an ignoramus, you know, sort of a jack of all trades. I very much I don't like being in front, but you point me in the direction and say, do that. I will do my best to get it done, regardless of whatever it is. And if I don't know how to get it done, I guarantee you I know somebody who does.
Yeah, for sure. I want to circle back for a moment to your roses, and I want to kind of break them up into like three sections. So we've got the new player who's working on their first to third roses. You've got your kind of middle player; they're starting to get more involved. Call it 4 to 7, and then you've got your people who are really trying to push for, you know, high end 8, 9, 10 masterhood. What is some specific advice for those who are pursuing the rose path for masterhood in each of those sections for the people trying to climb the ladder awards?
The biggest piece of advice I can give anybody, especially for service, is you need to be visible. People need to see what you're doing. And that's not who I am, which is probably why I had such a long stretch, is I'm not the in-your-face kind of person. And I don't necessarily mean, you know, be like, hey, look at me, I threw the trash away. No, but just try to be visible as much as you can, because you'll get more notice that way. People will see what you're doing, and you'll, more often than not, you'll get more recognition for it. It's not that people who aren't flashy don't, because clearly we do. But from my perspective, is just kind of be out there. You've got to, and don't be afraid to pitch yourself. You know, again, you got to find that. You know, you're not trying to be a braggart and say, "Hey, I did this, give me this," but you got to be willing to put yourself out there. And like for lower level stuff, you know, enter, or well, that's, I'm sorry, service, not ANS. Wow. For lower level service stuff, reeve, pick up garbage. Sorry. For off, that's where you're going to get your firsts, your seconds, your thirds. Is, you know, hey, I see this needs to be done. What can I do? When you start trying to get, you know, higher up, your 4th through 7th, or maybe even 8th, at that, you're going to have to start trying to really honestly, like, hold office of some variety. It doesn't have to be anything crazy. A excellent stepping stone for holding office is GMR. Find that too, because GMR overall, it's depending on the kingdom, but GMR has very low level responsibilities, and so it allows you to kind of get more of a feel for what it's like to be in office without having to run the weekly field into, like, if you're a prime minister doing all the paperwork, or if you're the monarch who's fielding messages all day long because so-and-so says something about so-and-so, and now so-and-so is pissed off. And now, and for the mid-level stuff, you know, it's going to be more more park level, like run for park level stuff. Champion regent, if you feel comfortable with it, running for monarch or prime minister. It shouldn't be exclusively that, but that tends to be what gets the most recognition is holding office, or being on a subcrat on event bids is also a really good way to get your mid-level stuff. Warcrat, Feastocrat, depending on it kind of depends on the kingdom, but everybody's a little bit different. Like CG or GV for a long time used to have somebody at the events who their whole job was to organize and run quests. So you questocrat and all that kind of stuff like that. So there's all different kinds of things you can, or be, if you're not a subcrat, be part of a subcrat's team, have somebody who's able to or willing to kind of push for recognition. But if you're going for higher level stuff, especially for service, as much as it sucks, you're going to have to kind of step into the kingdom as much as you're able. Kingdom level stuff at the very least, whether it be, I don't want to sit here and say that, you have to autocrat a big event, because I hate that mentality. I absolutely despise that mentality. But you are going to have to push your game up. Each level has got to be, to me, got to try to expand, move yourself, push yourself to do something a little bit bigger, or go into an area that you are less comfortable in to try to get a more well-rounded, and hopefully you do a good job at it.
That idea of taking the next step a little bit bigger every time. Questions. Oh yeah. Yeah. Sorry. Ask tons of questions. I get that. I can see that.
If you don't know, if you're like, I'm not sure how to work this, ask. Somebody does. Don't be afraid to put that out there. But sorry, yeah. So for me, it's more of a drive thing. Is I like to. So if this is what got me, let's say my 7th rose, for instance, my next one, let's say if I got my 7th rose for being a ducal GMR, my next one, my 8th one would need to be for something that I would find to be more challenging. So I would step up from GMR to champion. And then second, Zoe, come here. Sorry, my wife's taking the dogs out.
No worries.
But yeah, so that for me is my mentality, is I try to challenge myself. When I go on to the next one, I like to try to push myself, and if not necessarily, if I don't feel like I can do the job I was doing at a higher level, I will change to something else to try to challenge in an area that I haven't really explored yet, and see how well that goes. And there have been times that I've actually found stuff that I really love. Yeah, sometimes it's not always about up. Sometimes over can be just as rewarding and just as challenging.
I agree 100%. There are a lot of things that I have found to be incredibly enjoyable in this game that I did on a whim, just because I wanted to see if I enjoyed it, and I actually loved it and was able to run with it way further than I ever thought I would be able to. That's a good point.
Yeah, it doesn't always have to be up. Sometimes over is just as good.
I want to ask you about the Tenon Line a little bit. Tell me about your belt line, maybe above and below, and what makes your belt line unique. How do you run your belt line with, squires and people at arms and pages, and just word vomit a little bit for me about how you run your belt line, because I'm super fascinated with how different knights do this.
My path was a little different than most people's. I was originally squired to Dame Mistress Wind out of the CK. And there were people who I had known that were pages and men-at-arms and squires, and I knew none of it. I had no idea what any of it meant. I just knew that it meant that you were tied to this person, somebody. And Mistress Wind is somebody that I, to this day, still have a tremendous amount of respect for. She's been a close personal friend for well over 20 years. it really kind of came. It's funny, as it kind of came down to a coin toss. At the time, it was her or her husband, and I didn't know who I really wanted to approach first because they were really, as far as I was concerned, equal as to who I wanted to be part of. So I flipped a coin, and actually, I swear to God, this is the truth of it. I flipped a coin, and it actually landed on her husband, Father Thomas. And I talked to Tom, and Tom, the CK at the time had used to have limits as to how many people you could have per belt. I don't know if they still do, but they did. And Tom said he was really polite about it. He said he was all full up. So I went over and I talked to Sharon. I was 17, 18. I did not understand the etiquette that I was just completely butchering. I didn't know. So I went over and I talked to her, and she liked the idea. She said that she was flattered, and I want to say it was a week or two later, she brought my belt. She brought my red belt because I asked if I could be your squire. I didn't know about, I didn't know about, I knew of them, but I didn't know what the differences were. Mm-hmm. And so I asked if I could be her squire, and she thought it was the bee's knees. At least that's how I remember it anyways. And she brought the belt, and it was back in 98, I want to say. I was part of her belt line. This is before, all of the Yahoo groups and everything else like that. And our belt line was not super structured. It never felt that way. Sharon, Mistress Wind, was always more, she was there to support and encourage, not necessarily to, at least for me, support and encourage, and not necessarily to set tasks. I know that some people set tasks for their beltlings or under belts, excuse me. And it's just not how I do. I still kind of work the way she did. After I moved out west, I would say 2009, 2010, I ended up actually dropping my squire's belt. And not for any kind of personal reasons. It was just we were too far apart. I was in Maryland. I was in New York at that point. She's still back in Texas. And it just wasn't a lot of communication. And it was nobody's fault. It's just what it is. So I ended up dropping a belt, and I stayed. I did not. Well, nobody ever came up to me and offered another belt, and I didn't approach anybody else about being belted. I kind of wanted to go my own way for a while and see how that felt. And obviously, I'm a knight now. For lack of a better phrase, the font of my own line.
Yeah.
I wasn't belted to anybody else. Right now I have 2 squires, 2 men-at-arms. Yeah, 2 squires and 2. God, it makes me feel really bad. But and the way that I approach it is very much the same the way that Sharon approached it. Was I'm not really going to set you tasks. You need to you need to decide what you want to do in the game, regardless of whatever that happens to be. My job is to give you all of the knowledge I have in that field and try to help you as much as I am able. And obviously, if something is outside of my purview where I just don't have the knowledge, I'm going to get in touch with people who do to try to get that connection as part of my job to help you in whatever your path happens to be. So we're very laid back. More often than not, we send just really silly and shitty memes to each other. Is most of our communication.
It's bonding.
We're not very structured, but that's just kind of how I am. That's how I was raised, for lack of a better phrase, in Amtgard. I
like that. So tell me a little bit about your experience then. Because I think a fairly unique one for one who is trying to pursue masterhood and then eventually comes up for a COK vote without having a knight there to petition their cause or whatever you want to call it. Because I feel like that's a question that gets asked all the time: is do I have to be belted to become a knight? And obviously you weren't. So what was that experience like?
I wasn't belted to anybody. I did have a couple of advocates, people that I'm close friends with who are on the knights list, and asked them if they would be willing to be a voice for me. Mm-hmm. Not, it wasn't a case of, hey, tell them I'm awesome and give me a belt. Nothing like that. It was more like sort of a go-between because I didn't have that night to give feedback. Like if I was discussed and the COK felt I needed to work on a certain thing, the two people that I really worked fairly close with was Syr Bowen and Syr Colt were the ones that I really worked with. And it wasn't anything super structured or anything along those lines, but it was basically, hey, you came up for discussion. These are some concerns that people have. These are some things that people think that you're doing that are really well or doing them really well. And they kind of helped me steer into get hopefully a better chance, but just really kind of point me more in the right direction. I would say that it's not a path that I would recommend for everyone. Let me tell you that now. But clearly you don't need a knight to become a knight. I'm not the first person who was knighted without being belted to somebody. I'm not going to be the last person, but I think in some ways it's probably more difficult because you don't have somebody who's there that has intimate knowledge and can kind of help steer things or kind of help, when a discussion comes up beyond like, oh, I know him, he's my friend and he lives 10 hours away, so I don't really see him, but I'll definitely pass things on versus, hey, we play at the same park. This is my squire. This is what they're doing. So it can absolutely make it more difficult.
I get that for sure. I remember thinking before I became a knight that the knights lists were on Facebook and the whatever communication form that the knights use was 10 or 15 times more active than what it actually was, right? Right? Like you say they're talking about me, they're discussing me. I thought that like the knights every night were having conversations about all the different people in their team.
Same.
And it's not true. Like,
no.
So what are some things like that someone who is now on the other side dispel some of the myths that maybe you had before you were a knight for our listeners who are not knights?
So I think right now, and it's kind of hard because I got knighted. Let's see, I was knighted in March of 2019. So I had about a year where I was just kind of feeling my way through and kind of, for lack of a better phrase, growing into being a knight. People said that you'll do that, and I thought it was bullshit. But the truth of it is, you do sort of grow into the position as time goes on. And then right as I kind of really felt sort of comfortable in my role as a knight, COVID hit.
Yeah.
And so, but during that first year, man, we didn't talk hardly at all about anything. Maybe once or twice a reign, the monarch would reach out to whoever the GMOK was at the time and say, hey, do you guys have any advice on these people? And then we would discuss it very briefly. He would give their little snippets, and then it would go back to the monarch. And that'd be it. We wouldn't hear anything about it again for another 3 months, 4 months. Every now and again, somebody would bring up, hey, we need to change this. There was a Kapora change, so we need to change our bylaws, to kind of fit more in line with that, or, the odd discussion about activity and who can vote and who can't vote and all that other stuff like that. I very much like you were saying that I used to think that the COK was super active and was talking every night about having these long fights and everything else. And I'm like, man, we talk like somebody posts every other week, maybe maybe every other week. And it's usually, hi guys, we're not dead. And then everybody goes about their day. So our COK is also relatively small. From what I understand, GV's COK used to be far more active back when Nine Blades was part of Golden Veil, because they used to, what were they there? Yeah, they were part of Golden Veil for a long time. Then they moved over to Rising Winds, got their kingdom, and now they're their own thing. But when they moved over, I think GV lost probably half of its knights. So I think active right now in Golden Veil that I can think of is probably 6 or 7 of us that are actually active. And a lot of it's just life, jobs, kids, everything. It's not, you can't always be active. It just doesn't work out that way. But yeah, if you think that we're some sort of shadow organization who is determining the future of the game and who's going to become knights, it just doesn't work that way. It really doesn't. We just don't talk frequently enough for that to even be a thing that actually happens.
No, I remember when I got on the knights page for the Rising Winds, I wanted to scroll back and read through all of the posts. Yeah. I did it in an evening, and the kingdom has been that board has been around for 15 years. Yeah. Right. So it's not a big deal. And I know certain kingdoms have disagreements on this. In the Rising Winds, the in-person meetings at events were open to anybody. And so since I had been a squire, my knight and one of my other really good friends who is a knight in my fighting company, they both wanted me to come and sit in on the meetings and you talk about being visible and just being there and seeing how it all works. And so the majority of the disagreements and the drama and all of that happened in those in-person meetings that everyone was allowed to attend if they wanted to, type of thing. And it really, I don't know. I feel like people, you get the decoder ring and now you're a part of the secret organization with the secret handshake and like.
I actually messaged Jinx today and I said, hey, I want my decoder ring.
Yep. But I never got one of those. Wait.
I don't have my decoder ring. What's the secret handshake? Aren't we supposed to be like, yeah, no. No, did you? Yeah. Oh, well, I've got one. So there we go.
They must like me better.
So I got knighted during COVID. And so we're coming back out of it. And we were talking to some new players who I don't expect to know any of how any of this works, right? But they saw the Phoenix belt favor and that like, oh, you're a knight. It's like,
okay, yeah.
Yeah. We've been chatting for a month on this. What do you mean? Like, this is now a big deal. And they back up and aren't like, it's like their world just changed. Their perception of you changed because they understood what a knighthood means. And that's something that I'm still not used to. You know what I mean? I'm still not used to the different interactions now because of the symbols that we wear.
Fair enough. There's Sir Anders. I think he's moved back out to Colorado now, but he was out a long time Golden Veil Knight. When they announced that they were going to knight me, and he and I were having some discussions, and we didn't have a sit down because we lived states away, but we were talking online, and he basically sat me down and said to me, he goes, something that you're going to need to remember once you start putting that white belt on is you were going to be somebody's first knight. Hands down, you're going to be their first knight, and you need to think, what kind of impression do you want to leave on that new person? Good girl. And I've been several people's first knights and at this point, and I'm thankful that he said that to me because it's really kind of affected how I approach things, especially with new people. Because before it would be like, hey, I'm Falquinn. How you doing? I'm this silly, stupid idiot. And then now I'm like, hi, I'm Sean. Hi, how's it going? I'm Falquinn. Here's my dog. She's loud. I promise she's not going to bite you. But yeah, it's what?
Show the dog. She wants to be on camera. She's looking at you.
Oh, Jesus.
It's all good. We are very dog friendly on this podcast.
It looks like tried to get on camera.
So there's my conehound. And then over there is my other old lady.
I was going to say old girl.
Yeah. We just got her, actually. Friend of ours, father passed away a couple months ago and they needed to rehome him. So we went, drove up to New Hampshire last weekend and picked her up. But she's a sweet dog. For me, though, I don't like you were saying, like there are people that clearly act towards you after that. That's not something that I've at least noticed for me on him. Like I don't really notice anybody that treats me differently.
Like maybe a time in game thing.
Potentially.
So long for you to get your belt. Everybody knew you well already.
And that may have been part of it, but yeah, but I've absolutely seen it with other people where people started acting differently towards them once they got the white belt. But it's not something that I feel this experience. I'm not going to say it hasn't happened. It's just not something that I've noticed. I'm also incredibly oblivious. So hitting with a brick stick, I'm probably not going to know.
I've for me at least, it's been my buddies, my company mates, my belt line, my park mates. It's all pretty much the same, but it's the next step beyond that, like that acquaintance level, or those.
I'm not part of a fighting company, but yeah,
that's been a little different, you know, and not bad by any means, just a little different.
No, like pretty much everybody still treats me, at least as far as I can tell, everybody treats me no different than they did before.
Cool.
It's kind of nice. I was hoping that it would be something like that. I didn't.
I've got one more belt line question for you. What is if someone is interested in joining your belt line, are you one that you want to approach that person, or are you one that wants them to come and ask you, or a combination of both?
Kind of a combination of both. Most of the people that I've ever had belted to me are people that I approached. Somebody that I saw that I felt definitely had some promise in one aspect that I really kind of wanted to help guide. And so I'd approach them and say, you know, hey, I like what you're doing. I'd like to offer you this. You know, you don't have to answer immediately. You know, if the answer is no, it's all good. But I don't think I've ever actually had anyone come to me though. So now that I think about it, I'm always the one who goes to other people. It's just sort of the way it worked out.
Yeah, and I've seen knights on both sides, and I don't think one is inherently better than the other. I just think it's interesting for knights to say it sometimes, because I think that there's this stigma of I can't approach the knight and ask for a belt. And most knights that I know of are cool with that. Like, that's like, yeah, come on up if you think it's a good relationship and I can help you. Yeah.
Yeah. And I haven't been on the other end, but yeah, absolutely. Yeah. If there's somebody that thinks that I might be a good fit for them, by all means, man, reach out. The worst I could say, I'm not gonna be a dick about it, you know, because some people, like, there are people that I'm really good, close personal friends with that we would not make good beltline members. We would clash. And these are good friends that I can hang out with all the damn time. But if we were in that situation, it wouldn't work well.
Yeah, 100%. I think I like your story because it shows that you don't have to be a knight, or you don't have to be belted to be a knight. And I think so many new players, they see the belts as I have to become a page in my first year, and then I have to become a man-at-arms here, and I have to get a squire belt. And while that stuff is awesome and really cool, I can be your friend and even be a mentor without you being in my belt line. And then if you're not in any belt line, that doesn't exclude you from masterhood or from knighthood. And I really like your story because you emphasize that with being, you know, you didn't have a knight, and look, here you are. Like, that's cool.
It's not a necessity, but it's not a necessity for sure. Yeah. I kind of like, I tend to choose the more difficult paths unintentionally. It just sort of seems to be the way that it is. And my wife's choking over there because she's
funny.
I'm sorry. I feel like I'm kind of being boring. That's kind of where I got right now. You don't need it. You don't need to be knighted to some, or to be squire to somebody, or man at arms, or a page. Something else is, you don't need that to have a mentor, apprentice-ish sort of relationship with somebody either. There are people that I have gone way above and beyond to help with things that aren't belted to me and will never be belted to me. It doesn't need to be that way, but having that closeness, that sort of family relationship is also really nice too. So I know for me, when I was younger, having that sense of family was huge, absolutely huge. So
I love it. So I've got one kind of fun question here as we wrap up. So I want you to take your masterhood, so Rose for you. If you were in charge of building a Mount Rushmore, top 4 can be best, can be most influential, can be however you want to interpret the question. You are building a Mount Rushmore for roses in Amtgard. Who are you putting on your Mount Rushmore and why?
Okay. So if I was building a Mount Rushmore, it would be the people that, for me, who have influenced me. That would be, it would be Dame Mistress Wind, who was my knight for a long time. Sir Father Thomas, because he was super influential to me as well, been a long time friend and has taught me a lot more than I think he may realize. There's another one. His name is Syr Falquinn. He's down in North Carolina now, but he's an old school war dancer. He's actually founded Crystal Groves. And the fourth person on that list is actually not a knight. I think they should be a knight, but they're not. Her name is Lady Syra. They were super influential in how I approached the game. How I approach service with new folks, all that kind of stuff like that. And if it wasn't for the things they taught me, I wouldn't be here. Yeah,
that's awesome.
I know that I've seen some of the videos where people are like, oh, MHOG or this or that or whatever else. And I'm not disagreeing with some of the choices, but for me, like those are names that I know, but people that I'm not super familiar. So for me, it's people that I know that have been huge influences in my life, let alone Amtgard.
Hey, it's your Mount Rushmore. You're going to build however you want. So last question here. Is there any topic in particular that I didn't ask a question on that you want to, you got the platform, you got the mic. If there's a hot button issue or a current events issue or anything coming up that you want to shout out and plug, you've got the floor for this last little question. If there's anything you want to chat about that I did not bring up.
Nothing that's coming to mind that isn't rules related. It doesn't actually have anything to do with that doesn't actually have to do with being a Flame Knight. Just V9 stuff. But I'll leave that for a different conversation. I just want, for me, people to know that you can do it. It's just not always going to be an easy path. And you have a lot more people behind you, I think, than a lot of people realize. There are people that are rooting for you a lot of times that you don't know are actively rooting for you. And you can do it. You got it. It's just going to take some time.
Sure. I love that. The closing on a positive note of encouragement that when you hit that wall, know that there are people who enjoy your company, people who like you as a person, and who want what's best for you, even if you don't always see it. So
they're there. You may not know it, but they're there.
Yeah, I agree 100%. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and close up this episode of the Archive. Audience, thank you so much for tuning in and watching today. If you like this content, want to see more of it, please hit that like and subscribe button on YouTube. It really does help out a whole lot. A couple of little announcements here at the end. I am working on getting this podcast on Spotify and iTunes and all of those. So that look forward to that if you're looking for an audio only version of this show. Second thing, I am also working on my first ebook, which is going to be a LARPing 101 field book, and is hopefully going to be a useful tool to help you if you're a new player get in to the game, and not just our game, but how to find games, what games are out there, what genres are out there. So that is in the works, and stay tuned for that. With my plug out of the way, I am St. Godric. That is Syr Falquinn. Thank you very much for coming on. I had a good time with this.